My father didn't invite me to his wedding, but everyone stood when I walked in with the bride at my own father's wedding. A bouncer stopped me. "Name?" he grunted. "Lily Carmichael. Sorry, ma'am. You're not on the guest list for Mr. Carmichael's wedding. I'm 32, and I watched my stepmother, Victoria, smile thinly and say to her sister, 'Honestly, I don't know why Robert even invited her.'" The words, though soft, carried across the polished marble, landing like tiny, sharp stones in my chest. It wasn't the first time I'd been overlooked, but the deliberate exclusion on such a momentous day, my father's supposed happiest day, felt like a deliberate act of emotional erasure. All she does is volunteer at that dusty old animal shelter. They had no idea that my dusty old animal shelter work had just exposed a multi-million-dollar illegal wildlife trafficking ring. They knew nothing of the clandestine meetings, the encrypted communications, the dangerous individuals I'd confronted in the quiet corners of the world, all under the guise of rescuing a few abandoned puppies. My hands, which they imagined covered in dog hair, were often tracing complex digital footprints, unmasking criminals. They didn't know the truth because it was an ongoing investigation, shrouded in absolute secrecy for the safety of countless lives. But today they're about to find out, because I'm not just here as an uninvited guest. I'm here to ensure justice is served, not just for the voiceless animals, but for the years of dismissive glances and belittling remarks. Have you ever been cut out by your own family until the truth forced them to acknowledge your worth? Tell me in the comments. You're not alone. The bouncer shifted impatiently, his massive frame a polite but unyielding wall. "Look, lady, I gotta ask you to move." His tone was bored, accustomed to dealing with hopeful gatecrashers, not daughters denied entry to their own father's wedding. Just then, a sleek white limousine, stretched and gleaming, pulled up to the curb, a beacon of extravagance. My father, Robert, emerged first, his face a mask of joyous pride, beaming like a man who had finally achieved perfection. He offered a hand to Victoria, who stepped out in a cloud of white lace and silk, her smile so wide it seemed painted on, reaching her eyes with a glint of triumph. He saw me standing awkwardly by the velvet rope, the bouncer's hand still raised in a prohibitive gesture. A slight pause in his step, a barely perceptible tightening around his eyes, then a dismissive shrug. He leaned into Victoria, whispering something that made her giggle, and then, loud enough for me and the bouncer and half the arriving guests to hear, he chuckled. I didn't flinch. My face remained carefully neutral. But inside, a lifetime of hurt solidified into ice, an unshakable resolve. My stepmother, Victoria, adjusted her veil, her movements graceful, her smile fixed and smug, a silent victory dance. My father, without another glance, without a flicker of acknowledgement, turned away, sweeping Victoria past me as if I were merely a forgotten shadow. They swept past me like I was invisible. No one acknowledged me, no one looked back. The air around them seemed to shimmer with their importance, and I, Lily Carmichael, was utterly erased from their narrative. I stood there, rooted to the spot, feeling the cold indifference wash over me, watching my father and his new wife disappear into the opulent ballroom, the heavy oak doors closing behind them with a muffled thud. It felt like I was just a misplaced coat check ticket, an inconvenient leftover. The bouncer cleared his throat again, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Seriously, I need you to move." I nodded once, my jaw tight, and stepped back, blending into the crowd of onlookers and late arrivals. Not because I was defeated, not because their dismissal had broken me, but because something inside me had hardened, cold, clear, and irrevocably determined. Let them celebrate their facade, their hollow joy, their carefully constructed lie, because the truth was coming, and it was walking in with the bride. It was a silent promise, etched into my very soul. My father thinks I just rescue stray cats. He pictures me in dusty overalls, coaxing frightened kittens from storm drains, a sweet but ultimately insignificant hobby. What he doesn't see, what they none of them see, is the secure, sterile lab, filled with gleaming computers and sophisticated forensic equipment, hidden deep within the city. This isn't some quaint animal shelter. It's a high-tech nerve center, a hub of global investigations. One wall is nothing but glowing screens, satellite feeds, intricate web diagrams, and constantly updating data streams, my battlefield, where I fight a different kind of war. Just the night before my father's wedding, while he was no doubt rehearsing his vows or toasting his new life, I was in that lab, coordinating a raid on a major international wildlife trafficking network. The air hummed with tension, the only light coming from the monitors. My voice was calm, clear, decisive, cutting through the static of the comms. Eagle 1, hold. We have secondary targets approaching from the north. Unmarked vehicles, multiple heat signatures, likely armed. Abort entry. That call, made in the dead of night, his file showed a surprising, chilling connection to Victoria Vance's family, a network of illicit dealings that stretched further than anyone imagined. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. While I was working tirelessly, putting my own safety at risk to dismantle a criminal empire that touched their lives, my father was texting me. A notification had popped up on my personal phone, glowing innocently on the lab desk. "Hope you're enjoying your little pet projects, sweetie. Don't get too messy." He had no idea. None of them did, because I never told them. Secrecy wasn't a burden, it was a necessity for the job, a shield to protect the innocent and expose the corrupt. I'd accepted that years ago, embraced the quiet anonymity, until that morning at the entrance, when silence didn't feel like strength or a professional necessity. It felt like erasure, a deliberate act to make me disappear from their lives. I stood there for a long moment, the sting of my father's words still fresh, when an unmarked police car pulled up silently beside the curb. Chief Inspector Davies stepped out, her tailored suit crisp, her posture radiating authority, her tired eyes missing nothing. She was a woman who had seen the worst of humanity and still fought for justice. Her gaze swept over the bouncer, then settled on me. "There you are, Miss Carmichael," she said, her voice clear and carrying, loud enough for several arriving guests to hear. "We were just about to come looking for you." The bouncer's face, previously a mask of bored indifference, went from confusion to utter bewilderment in 0.2 seconds. He recognized the chief inspector, the sudden deference palpable. He quickly unhooked the velvet rope, practically yanking it aside as if it feared for its very existence, ushering us forward. The velvet rope was instantly unhooked, as if it feared for its very existence, and as Chief Inspector Davies gently guided me past, her voice lowered just enough for only me to hear, a conspiratorial whisper against the murmur of the arriving wedding guests. "Do you want me to have a word with them?" Her eyes flickered towards the grand ballroom entrance, where my father and Victoria had just disappeared, a knowing glint in their depths. She understood the sting of their dismissal. I glanced towards the imposing doors, picturing their smug faces inside, celebrating their charade. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, a calm resolve settling over me. "I have a feeling they'll figure it out on their own." The irony of them celebrating their union, built on a foundation of secrets and deceit, was a powerful motivator. And we walked right past them. Chief Inspector Davies in her formal uniform, her presence commanding, and me in my simple. For once, the silence, the power, it was mine. Inside the opulent ballroom, the atmosphere was a whirlwind of hushed conversations, clinking glasses, and the soft strains of a string quartet. Guests were seated, their faces beaming with polite smiles. My father, Robert, stood at the altar, beside a radiant Victoria. The officiant began to speak, her voice a calm drone against the building anticipation. My father then began to walk down the aisle, a triumphant procession, Victoria clinging to his arm. Hext walked down the aisle like a king claiming his throne, his chest puffed out, acknowledging the applause. He thanked Victoria, the officiant, then paused, looking out at the assembled guests, a proud, possessive gaze. Not a single word about me, his daughter, not a glance in my direction, not even a fleeting acknowledgement of my existence. The erasure was complete, a deliberate act of emotional banishment. He had built a new life, a new family, and I was not a part of it. The pain, a dull ache I'd carried for years, flared, but beneath it, a steely resolve solidified. Suddenly, dramatically, the grand, heavy doors at the back of the ballroom swung open with a soft whoosh. All heads, previously focused on the bridal party, snapped towards the disturbance. Chief Inspector Davies stood framed in the doorway, her presence immediately cutting through the celebratory chatter, a stark contrast to the soft, romantic atmosphere. Lily stood silently beside her, her gazes unwavering. "We have an unscheduled guest," Chief Inspector Davies announced, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the murmurs and expectant silence. For reasons of ongoing investigation, this presence has remained undisclosed until today. The room shifted. Curiosity, confusion, tension so thick you could slice it with a butter knife. Whispers erupted, hushed and urgent. What was happening? Who was this woman? And who was the quiet, determined woman beside her? And then she said it, her voice resonating with authority, drawing all eyes to me. "Ms. Lily Carmichael, here to escort the bride." Time stopped. A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by a wave of whispers, growing louder, more incredulous. And then, like a rising tide, almost imperceptibly at first, every guest in the room, every single person, including my father, stood. They rose, not out of respect for me, not yet, but out of a sudden, instinctive reaction to the chief inspector's words, to the unspoken tension in the air. Every single one, except for Victoria, who remained frozen, a deer in headlights, her carefully constructed smile dissolving into a mask of pure terror at the altar. I rose, my legs steady, my spine straight, and walked towards the aisle. No hesitation, no apology. Chief Inspector Davies nodded at me, a silent signal, a confirmation. It was time to tell my story, not with words but with presence, with the weight of truth behind me. And I walked, slowly, deliberately, down the aisle, past the stunned faces, past the whispers that now focused solely on me. The chief inspector then began to speak, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the murmurs, her gaze sweeping over the silent room. She didn't recount my past, my personal struggles, but instead, with a significant, pointed glance at Victoria, she revealed the details of the ongoing criminal investigation. She laid bare the scale of the illegal trafficking, the horrific cruelty involved, and then, her voice rising with quiet power, she explained how my expertise, my quiet, overlooked work, had been crucial. And it was Ms. Carmichael's unwavering dedication and scientific, her eyes wide with panic. She knew exactly whose actions had exposed her brother, whose network was now unraveling. She wasn't the only one in that room with secrets. My father, standing frozen at the altar, looked from Victoria to me, a dawning horror in his eyes. The murmurs erupted into a roar of shock and outrage, but I didn't hear them. What I heard, what mattered, was the stunned silence from my father, the profound, deafening silence from the man who had always dismissed me. The kind of silence you get when someone realizes their carefully constructed world, built on lies and omissions, is crumbling around them. It wasn't revenge, not truly. It was exposure, a revelation of truth, and that was always what I intended. 6 months later, the opulence of the ballroom was a distant memory, replaced by a quiet, subtle shift in my father's life. I walked into his newly rearranged study, a room once filled with dusty ledgers and a pervasive sense of formal detachment. Now it felt different, lighter. Against the far wall, where previously only a framed photo of my father and Victoria stood, there was a new, smaller, elegant display stand, crafted from dark walnut. It was simple, yet profound. Inside, nestled amongst a few treasured family heirlooms, was a framed photo of my mother, her smile soft and warm. Beside it, a small, intricately carved wooden pangolin, a quiet symbol of the lives I'd fought to save. And in the center, eye level, gleaming under the soft lamplight, was a plaque from the Department of Justice, a formal commendation for my work, and beside it, a photo of me, standing with Chief Inspector Davies, a rare, genuine smile on my face. "I had it made last month," my father said softly, his voice devoid of its usual stiffness, as he poured me a cup of herbal tea. Said it was time the Carmichael family display told the whole story. The pause before Disped was telling, acknowledging that family had always been a narrow definition for him. That night at dinner, the atmosphere was different. No one bragged about their achievements, no one compared careers or accomplishments. Instead, a genuine sense of curiosity filled the air. Dad cleared his throat, not for attention, but with a slight tremor of uncertainty. "Lily," he began, looking at me directly, truly seeing me for the first time in years. "How do you manage those high-stakes investigations? Must be like navigating a minefield." It wasn't a performance. It was genuine curiosity, a desire to understand my world, a world he had so carelessly dismissed. Later, as the evening softened and the stars emerged, my father and I sat on the old garden bench, the same bench. It was about appearances, about my image. I thought I had to be seen a certain way to maintain a certain status. The confession hung in the air, heavy with unspoken regret. I smiled, not out of superiority, not out of a desire for vindication, but because the weight, the burden of their dismissal, was finally lifted. "I spent years thinking I needed your approval to be whole, Dad," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "But the truth is, my worth isn't something you can give or take away. It's inherent. It's something I carry regardless of who sees it." He nodded slowly, a profound understanding dawning in his eyes. He reached out, hesitantly, and placed a hand on my arm, a gesture of connection I hadn't felt in decades. "I'm proud to be your father, Lily," and for the first time I could say it back with peace in my heart, a profound sense of healing. "And I'm proud to be your daughter, Dad." Because this wasn't just exposure, not just the shattering of their illusions. It was true liberation. If you've ever been ignored, dismissed, or